first of all, I was leaving an industry that I had now been in for 10 years where I did have security and an income. Yes, I know what it feels like to be 100% commission because that's where I started. I pulled the Band-Aid and knew I didn't have a plan B.
Today, we sit down with Kim Rogne, a true powerhouse in real estate and entrepreneurship. Kim's career spans over 25 years, from thriving in sales to leading a multi-million-dollar brokerage as CEO. She's built a reputation by helping others not just sell homes, but run thriving businesses. In this episode, Kim pulls back the curtain on her transition from a high-level executive role to founding her own coaching business for the love of, where she specifically helps ambitious working moms. Kim shares her personal experience on overcoming adversity, the importance of mindset, and actionable strategies for balancing career, family, and self-care. She'll also share how moms can turn their households into a well-oiled CEO home system and how they can silence the guilt and ask for help when they need it. If you've ever thought about reinventing your career or finding greater fulfillment while raising a family, this episode is for you. As always, if you found value from this content, please like and subscribe. And if you love this episode, please go to ratethispodcast.com/beyondfulfillment and leave a review. All right, Kim Rogne, welcome to Beyond Fulfillment.
Thanks, Dave. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. I am excited that you could take the time to be here. So, Kim, let's get right into it. So, you spent 25 years in real estate sales and brokerage management. How did that shape your perspective on entrepreneurship?
Oh gosh, such a good question. Well, the first 15 years I was in sales. That's entrepreneurship, right? No guarantee. We know somewhere between 80 and 90% of those that get into the real estate industry who say they love people and homes, love decorating when we know it's not really all about that, fail and don't make it. And then the last 10 years before starting my current business, I was the CEO of several multi-million dollar brokerages. And so when you're leading a multi-million dollar brokerage, there's all these things you have to do, hold the profit and loss statement accountable for the investors, hire the CFO, hold your team accountable. And then the last brokerage that I left, I had 183 associates that were 100% commission and they were entrepreneurs. And my number one job was to lead the top agents and teams, those that were grossing six figures to upwards over $1 million, and helping them learn how to run a business and not just sell homes. So that experience definitely gave me, all of the pieces to the puzzle, if you will, to what I'm doing now. Don't get me wrong. I do not have all of the answers. I am still learning, but that definitely helped bring me where I am today.
Okay. And as you detailed there, I mean, you found success, a high level of success in an industry where the vast majority fail. It sounds glamorous going in. A lot of people like the idea of real estate sales, but like you said, most don't make it because again, you eat what you kill, and you have to constantly be selling homes really to produce the level of income needed. So how did you succeed in an industry that so many others fail?
Mm. Well, when I think back, I am 52 years old now. And so when I started in the industry, it was 1998, which is, for some of your listeners, they probably weren't even born then. But when I started, I didn't know anybody. I was in an area where I did not grow up. And some of the things that I committed to were in relation to getting connected, first of all, with those that were already succeeding. And I believe that for anybody, even when I'm coaching and somebody's new at building a business, it's let's go learn from those that have already done what you're looking to do. That's one. And then secondly, what's really funny is a lot of times, whether somebody's getting into real estate or starting any other sort of small business, the first thing everybody starts to do is like, well, what's my logo? What's my website going to look like? I got to print these business cards. And I'm like, oh, I didn't do any of that because none of that really mattered. If somebody tried to find my website, they wouldn't even know who I am. And so it's really getting into action. Any sales business is about the action part of it. It's about having the conversations to find the people that need help based on the service that you're going to give them. So those were the things that I did in the beginning that I think really helped catapult my real estate business, sales business at that time, to a high level.
Yeah, I love that, right? Because I'm sure so many people can relate to that in their own businesses with people in sales or others around them kind of, focusing on all those non-important activities when really, particularly in sales, right? The main thing you need to be doing is talking to customers or potential customers, all the time and getting into action. So yeah, like
Hmm.
you said, so important. So after that 15 years of sales success, what was that transition like going into the CEO role?
Sure. So, to be quite honest, for a short period of time, I actually left the real estate industry. It was 2006. It was at a very, very challenging time in most markets. We call that the crash of real estate. We had some investments where we lost tens of thousands of dollars. And I did have to get a real job for a moment in time. I had always been the main breadwinner. My husband, I married him for his benefits because, he's a retired firefighter and they have beautiful benefits. We kind of joke about it. But I needed to go and, I guess, get some sort of guarantee during a very challenging time. While I was in that stint for a moment, I still kept in touch with all of those real estate brokers. And I was actually calling all of the real estate brokers because at that time I worked for a tech company and I was selling infrastructure for small businesses, server rooms, things like that. And I went to all my real estate brokers. I said, hey, you know me, I know you, do you need some help? Long story short, I ended up meeting with one and the tables turned. And she said, hey, we think we have a leadership position for you. I thought we were going to be talking about her tech infrastructure. So that's when I started because I kept in touch with people that I knew. I was professional. And in turn, I then got recruited into a recruiting slash broker management position. And that's really honestly how it started. And then it just blew up from there. And I ended up selling my book of business. A lot of real estate agents don't do that. So when I had left the industry, I sold that to a couple of top agents and just right away moved into leadership. And that's where I was for 10 years.
Okay. Wow. So the power of relationships, like you said, you had a difficult time, you had to leave the industry for a minute, but you kept in touch and you were still cultivating all those relationships you had. And then it turned into that next opportunity, which really blossomed from there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And so you did the CEO role for about a decade or so, is that right?
Yeah. 10
Okay.
years.
And what was the biggest challenge you faced when you transitioned from that CEO role to founding, your current company for the love of?
Ooh, well, first of all, I was leaving an industry that I had now been in for 10 years where I did have security and an income. Yes, I know what it feels like to be 100% commission because that's where I started. But we built a lifestyle based on my security of the income. We had two kids in college at that time. And really, if I come full circle and how I got to that point, what had happened was I slowed down. I was forced to slow down. I had a traumatic skiing accident, which forced me to slow down for the very first time in 25 years and do some introspective work on, okay, is this what I want to continue to do for the second half of my best life? And as I was going through this journey of healing after my accident, I just decided that I was tired of the chaos, tired of the drama. It was very, very hard work, very rewarding, but at the same time, extremely demanding. And I'd always loved coaching. I loved speaking. It filled my joy. It gave me energy. And so lucky for me, I do have a supportive spouse and I sat down with my groom and I said, hey, I have this idea, which we always laugh about because then he's like, oh, should I get a drink? What's your idea, honey? And I said, I think I'd like to retire from this role and go and start my own company. And one, I had the support. Two, when I started my business For the Love of in January of 2023, I pulled the Band-Aid and knew I didn't have a plan B. So the plan was go build your company and go make money to help support your family. And that's what worked for me. I needed to have the mindset of not having a plan B, no choice, have to go make it work. And that's how it all unfolded.
Okay, wow. So you're in this CEO role. You've got the income. You're an industry you have experience in. You're having fun, but yet, like you said, chaos, and it's I guess not an ideal scenario. And then you have this accident, right? And slowing down and self-discovery is something else you talk about in your work. But I mean, how soon did you realize, right? Because you're injured and you're not, you're forced to slow down. How soon did you realize that you wanted to make that pivot?
I didn't right away. I remember being on a Zoom 7 days after getting back from Colorado, getting on a plane, having broken my tibia, my fibia, my ankle, you know, having to be reminded by my surgeon that it was a traumatic skiing accident and I was still working. I was on a Zoom, I was leading, I was talking to my leadership team. I then started going into the office in the mornings. I would have my husband drive me in. I was in a wheelchair. And so that was in January. So my accident was at the end of January. And all this time I'm pretty much working. And March 1st rolls around and I went to one of the investors and I said, I think that this is not working for me. I had certain metrics that I was held responsible to. I wasn't meeting the metrics. I was only half in, half out. And I said, I think I need a leave of absence. And so I did end up then taking a 6-week leave of absence, but I did it in the beginning because a real estate brokerage is a very small, large business. If you think about 183 associates, they're all running their own mini business under the umbrella. But there's only a staff of 6, right? We're not a big corporation. And so as much as we were a team, a leadership team, we also had our little silos. And so I said that they gave, I took a leave of absence and it was during that time. And when I say the forced slowdown, that's literally what it was. It was me with myself, with my thoughts, thinking and knocking on the door of 50. I would be lying if that doesn't change your mindset, or when your kids are in college. We all have these phases throughout our life. I think you have younger kids, right? How old are your kids?
Sixth grade is the youngest and 22 is the oldest.
Okay, so you've got, both phases, but they're different phases, right? We're in different seasons of our life, and we go through all of these different seasons, and it is a season when they're semi-adulting, and it was just me, watching a whole lot of Golden Girls and, coloring books and visiting my Anneogram and my disc. And I dug out all of my assessments and I was like, okay, now you're going to actually slow down and read it. Like, what does it mean to be a learner? What does it mean to be, whatever, and just read through them and actually take them in. And then how can I go design something that will now work with my new lifestyle? A little bit more freedom, right? My husband knocking on the door of retiring at that time. And so it was a journey. It didn't happen immediately. And then what had happened was I was at a class that we were running, our brokerage was running, and I had given notice already. I gave a 2-month notice, and somebody came up to me, one of the real estate agents came up to me and she said, "So what are you going to do next, Kim?" And I'm like, "Well, I know I'll coach because I've already been doing that. But I don't really know, maybe I'll align myself with a company. Maybe I'll, kind of work for myself, but be aligned with a company." And she said, "Why would you do that? I'd pay you. I pay you to coach me. And this is somebody who made, probably $500,000 in her business. And it took that moment for me to hear it from somebody else to actually believe that I could go do it. And so that's how it started. And here I am today, speaking, coaching, and still trying to figure out how to run an online business. It's very interesting and I'm learning a ton.
Wow. Okay. So many aspects of that story would love to unpack. So, um, you mentioned the age thing, knocking on the door of 50 and making a major career shift, right? That in itself has got to be very unnerving, right? And then going from the security of having the income to, and then as you said, right, you didn't want a plan B, you wanted that mindset where I'm all in and it's sink or swim, right? So doing that, and then also the belief aspect too, right? We see so many people where they have these goals and ambitions, desires, but for whatever reason, whether it's belief or something else, they just never take that leap and take the action to get started. So you did all of that. So like when you first launched, I mean, what was that like? I guess how I don't necessarily want to use how much anxiety was there when you first launched?
A lot. I still have anxiety. It definitely, I'm not going to pretend like it was all beautiful and perfect. I I did have enough experience to know a couple of things though. I knew that I needed to internally and externally, like deep down in my core, really believe that I could make this work. So I decided at that time, one of the things that I committed to was mindset journaling. And I mean, I study it, you study it. We know top high achievers start with their brains, right? They start with the belief, the internal, if you will. And we know when we work on that, then we can work on our external. And I had always been an inconsistent, consistent journaler. But this time I said, I'm going to do it every day because they tell me it works, meaning the Hal Elrod's who wrote The Miracle Morning, the Brendan Burchards, all of the big, huge personal and professional development experts out there. And so I got a dollar journal from wherever, Target, and just started journaling based on 3 prompts I heard on a podcast. And I did it every single day, every day. I cringed. I sometimes felt like it was a to-do, but I was like, this is where I'm going to start. This is where I'm going to start. I did that. That was one. The second thing that I did, I will never forget, in the month of January 2023, I had 32 lead generation, if you will, conversations. I made a commitment that I would talk to anybody and everybody that I knew to talk to them about coaching, whether they wanted it or not. So I severely pushed myself into action and pushed myself out of my comfort zone. I did not work on the business cards. It's funny that we started with that. I did not work on the website. I don't even have a website today. Got my little stand store, but there were just certain things I was like, that doesn't matter because I have to go make money. My why was my family and 2 kids in college. And there has not been a month since I started this business that I did not make money. And when we talk about the journaling, what had happened was I was about 3 weeks into it, and I had a girlfriend text me, and she said, "Hey, Kim, I'm really working on this internal belief of myself. I'd like to create a new habit, and I trust you, and I know that you'll hold me accountable. And do you have any ideas?" And I said, "Okay, well, I'm doing this journaling thing that they, who are all smarter than me, told me worked. It works. And so why don't we do this? Why don't you journal? I'll journal, and we'll send each other pictures to hold each other accountable." And my friend Cindy was diagnosed with ALS in 2020. It is now 2025. I don't know when people will be listening to this, but she is 5 years into a diagnosis where she should no longer be here, and she's still here. And when she would send me her journal entries, she sends them on an eye gaze. She looks at an iPad at a screen and she types with her eyes. And that's how she sends it to me. And Dave, something happened. I started sharing her story with her permission. I was speaking about it. I would coach around it. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is working. Like her perception of herself is changing. Mine is changing. And it morphed over time where unsolicited, I would share her story, and then unsolicited, people would send me pictures of their journal entries. They'd be like, here you go. I'm doing it. I'm doing the thing. And that's how For the Love of Self, my journal, was actually born. I then created it on my own with my publisher and did research and all of that. But when you say, how did I do it or how it started, it did start with action and it started with mindset. And it was just doing it over and over and over again, kind of being bored about it, right? But at the same time, knowing just based on my experience that if I just did that without getting attracted to all the shinies and the sparklies and all those things that we can, it would work. And that's how it happened.
Yeah, and I love that story too, because so often when we see the entrepreneurs that are successful, the one common trait I notice, because I interview so many people, is a bias towards action, and it's really messy, imperfect action when you don't even know exactly if it's going to work, how it's going to work, how it's going to happen, right? So it sounds like you didn't know how it would happen, but you took the
Mhm.
action, you kept doing it, and then lo and behold, you experience these other serendipities, and then ultimately it morphs into your journal, and your coaching business continues to expand, and you're having all these relationships where people, again, are using or holding each other accountable, right? So, but again, I guess that the genesis of that was taking action regardless of how you feel or anything else. Is that right?
Yeah, that's so good. Interesting enough, I was listening to an interview with Brendan Burchard and I'm drawing a blank at the moment what podcast he was on, and he coaches for billionaires. So he coaches billionaires, Olympians, he is a high performance coach. And he had asked these billionaires, what makes you different? Why are you a billionaire? And they actually said they have assertiveness in taking action with only 60% of the information. So they don't have 100% of the how to do it or what to do or what does it look like. It's exactly what we're talking about. They just go and take action. And that's what I did. I was like, I'll just go take action. I mean, it sucked in the beginning. I feel bad. I'm sorry if anybody's listening and I coached you January of 2023, probably all of 2023. My apologies. Like it probably sucked.
Wow. Well, but again, right, you took the action and now look at you, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so your coaching business specifically is geared towards working moms. So I mean, let's talk about that for a moment because when I think of moms, I think of the rock of the family and the one that's doing so many different things, and the kids and the house and all the other and so many, the one that really keeps the family together, right? So why is it so important for working moms to ask for help, and how can they overcome the guilt that's associated with that?
We're speaking to my heart. Well, one, I have always been a working mom. I know what it feels like to be a single working mom. A third of the year I was by myself when my husband was working 24-hour shifts. I have always been the main breadwinner. I also know what it feels like to think that your worth is about doing it all. And so sometime between maybe the 1950s and 2025, when, sometime in that era where there was the whole movement of, women can do just as much as men can do. They can work outside the home. They can have their own dreams. They can be CEOs. There was messaging that never really equalized what it really means in the sense of, hey, wait, this is a shared partnership. That doesn't mean I need to do it all. And so a lot of the working moms that I coach who are high performers, they are still feeling that their worth isn't doing it all. And so a lot of what I coach to is about gaining clarity about what you want your family life to look like and how you can equalize that, and also give up the control. I mean, I'm not going to lie, we might be part of the problem, ladies. We also like to control things. Like, I'm sorry, Dave, you're not folding the towels right. Hand them over. Now I'll do it. Right. And so, I do coach like a whole entire CEO home system that I used with my kids. And, I wasn't perfect by any means, but at the same time, it's just taking a moment to ask yourself, what would you do if you were a CEO of a company? You would not be doing it all. You would be a team. You would ask for help. And when you can start thinking about your home that way, it then can create better balance and less guilt and less comparison. And so that's a lot about what I coach when I'm working with high achieving working moms.
Yeah, I love it. Can you just go a little deeper on the CEO home concept and kind of what that program entails? Because that sounds really interesting and something like a lot of our listeners could potentially benefit from.
Oh, yes. I'm going to give some tacticals right now. And interesting enough, I didn't realize I did this when we were raising our girls. And I may say there was a we, right? But I was the one that created all the systems. And that's just because I'm a process systems girl. I did interview my daughters. They're 21 and 23. And so I recently interviewed them about it. I'm like, do you remember when we did these things? And so some of the things that we did. So one, they're in kindergarten. We're talking elementary school. The mornings are the worst, families. I know it. They're terrible. We all want to get out of the house and we're all just, it's chaos, right? But you don't need to do it all. So one of the things we did is we created a vision board. We went around the house. We took pictures of all the things that they need to do before. Now, we didn't have iPads and technology back then like we do now, but it was, before you watch Disney Channel, you have to do all this. You have to be the one that's responsible to grab your lunch. You have to be the one that's responsible. I live in Wisconsin, and when you're in elementary school, you need your boots and you need your snow pants and all that. You got to do that. You look at the picture board, you put it together. That's a CEO system. Oh, by the way, guess what? Every Sunday, we packed our lunches together. I ain't packing your lunch. You're not coming home and telling me you didn't want to eat that sandwich that I made. You're going to do that. I'm going to do it beside you. I'm CEOing it. I'm packing my lunch. I'm teaching you that I value a healthy meal. I'm going to bring it to work. You bring it to work. If you forget your lunch, I am not getting in the car bringing it to school. I think you'll survive. That's what a CEO would do. We're going to go pack our luggage. Here's a good example. We're going to go pack our luggage for vacation. How many moms are packing their 10-year-old's luggage? Why are you doing that? Make a little list. They can pack it. You can check it with them. I had my kids doing laundry by the time they were 7, right? So I'm just saying, like, you don't need to do all that. And the beautiful part is when I now have asked my kids what they thought of it, they hated it then, but they love it now. They're like, that was amazing, Mom. Now, I will tell you the one thing that they told they wish I would have changed, and this can be a game changer in your household. One, we used to share a Google Calendar, and maybe by the time they were 10, 11, 12, just old enough to to understand how to use the technology to add something onto the Google Calendar, right? So if they want to go to a birthday party, you got to put it on the family calendar, not me, right? So that's what they did. But I would forward them the emails that we would get, in particular elementary school. I would forward them the emails, the weekly newsletter. I'd be like, hey, go take a look at this newsletter. Is there anything that we need to know as a family, the ice cream social, the whatever? And do we need to get that on the calendar? Let me know. Let's talk about it. And then let's get it on there. Well, apparently sometimes I would forget to forward the email and we would miss things. So one of my daughters said, you know what, Mom, you need to tell your working moms and dads, there should be one email for the family. So let's just say it's, rognyfamily@gmail.com. That is the only email that you use for all of your school and extracurricular activities. They only go to that email. Everybody has access to that email. Everybody can check it at any time. everybody can reply at any time. Then we're not having to wait for mom to forward it and miss something. So that was kind of I thought that was a brilliant idea. So those are just a few examples.
Okay, love that. Love that advice. And clearly it's worked out. So yeah, well, I'm sure if any of our listeners want to learn more, why don't you tell us? If people that they hear this, they say, wow, I could use some coaching, or I want to, connect with Kim and learn more about what she does and how it could potentially help me. What's the best way that people can reach out to you?
Yeah, great. Well, you can all get a free download from my For the Love of Self journal. So if you just go to Flow, FLO, like for love of, flowself.com. Working moms, I also created one with some examples for working moms, which is flowworkingmoms.com. So you can go and get those. And then you can find me all my information at kimrogne.com or Instagram at kimrogne or LinkedIn, Kim Rogne, and that's it. We keep it super simple, just my name.
Cool, cool. All right. Well, we will link that in the show notes for everyone. All right. Well, Kim, thank you so much for taking the time to be here, sharing all this valuable wisdom and experience from your journey with our listeners. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate all that you do to bring value to your listeners too.
Awesome. All right. And that's all the time we have for now. We will see you next time.